The Galactic Proctorate for sapient advancement was, by any measure, a monument to ego. Its spires, spun from crystalline carbon and raw ambition, didn't just scrape the sky of Xylos Prime. They jabbed at it, as if offended by its placid, purple emptiness. Within its hallowed, perpetually sterilized halls, the finest minds from 1,000 worlds came to be polished, graded, and ultimately confirmed in their own species' inherent superiority. The air itself hummed, a low thrum of anti-gravity, intellectual condescension, and a filtration system that could sift a microbe from a molecule. It was a place of profound seriousness, a place for learning, for debate, for the quiet, dignified advancement of the known galactic order. It was, therefore, the absolute worst place for a joke to show up. And by every metric the Proctorate held dear, humanity was a joke. A walking, talking, bipedal punchline. They were newcomers, a loud and messy species that had stumbled onto the galactic stage like a drunk man falling into an orchestra pit. Their homeworld, a chaotic mudball designated Sol 3, was rated as a Class 7 hazard. Not for its strategic value or technological threat, but for its sheer, unmitigated biological messiness. It was a planet that seemed to be actively trying to kill everything on it, a cosmic petri dish left out in the sun for too long. Naturally, the creatures that crawled from such a primordial soup were considered unrefined. They lacked the natural subdermal plating of the Cthar, the elegant psionic architecture of the Vex, or the silicon-based resilience of the Obolites. They were soft, squishy, composed primarily of water and baffling optimism. Their greatest technological achievement, according to the official academic briefs, was figuring out how to deep-fry anything. Lord Captain Cthar of the Unbroken Fist clan certainly held this view. He was a magnificent specimen of his people, a bipedal mountain of muscle and chitin. His head was a noble, hammer-shaped wedge, and his 4 arms could individually punch through the hull of a light freighter. To him, strength was the only truth, and humans were a biological falsehood. They were prey that had somehow forgotten to be eaten. His academic rival, an occasional conversation partner when no one more interesting was available, was Prelate Xylos of the Mindweave. Xylos was Cthar's opposite, a slender, willowy being whose physical form was little more than a necessary anchor for a brain that operated on 3 separate quantum levels. He communicated through modulated telepathic resonance that sounded, to most species, like condescending wind chimes. To Xylos, physical strength was the crude tool of lesser beings. True power was intellect, the ability to reshape reality with a thought. And by that metric, humans were about as sophisticated as a rock. A very simple, non-sentient rock. Observe it, Cthar grumbled, his voice a low rumble of shifting tectonic plates. He gestured with a secondary claw towards the Proctorate's central refectory, the Terran exchange student. It consumes its nutrient paste with a single, unbifurcated utensil. The inefficiency is offensive. Xylos didn't need to look. He could feel the human's presence, a tiny, dim flicker in the brilliant psychic tapestry of the hall. A mental void. Its species name is human, Lord Captain, and its designation is Jake. Protocol dictates we use their preferred identifiers. The wind chime tones dripped with the kind of patient superiority one might use when explaining color to a blind grub. Protocol is for diplomats and cowards, Cthar rumbled. I call it what it is, a liability. Look at its posture. The spinal column is tragically unsupported. A single blow, precisely delivered to the nape, would sever its primary nerve bundle. Its cranium is unprotected. Its limbs are spindly. It possesses no natural weapons. He made a low, guttural sound of disgust. Why is it even here? That was the question on everyone's mind. The Human Exchange Program was a recent and deeply unpopular initiative, a token gesture of inclusivity from the Galactic Council, most suspected. And the human they had sent was the most aggressively, disappointingly human specimen imaginable. His name was Jake. Just Jake. He had no clan name, no Mindweave designation, no string of titles. He was of average height and build for his species, with a mop of unruly brown hair that defied all known principles of grooming. His clothes were simple, functional fabrics in drab colors, a stark contrast to the shimmering energy robes and polished exoskeletons around him. He had a face that was, to the alien gaze, utterly unremarkable. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, all positioned with boring bilateral symmetry. He sat alone at a small table, methodically eating a bowl of what the universal synthesizer had determined was human comfort food. Macaroni and cheese. He was using a utensil called a spork. It was, as Kthar had noted, deeply inefficient. Jake looked up, feeling the weight of 1,000 alien stares, and offered a small, friendly smile to no one in particular. The effect was immediate. Dozens of advanced beings flinched. The human expression of smiling, the baring of the teeth, was a universal threat display in over 600 known cultures. To do so unprovoked was a sign of either extreme aggression or profound stupidity. The consensus on Jake was firmly the latter. He was a walking contradiction. He had tested in the 99th percentile on all mechanical and engineering aptitude exams, reportedly reassembling a decommissioned singularity drive using only a wrench and a paperclip. Yet he'd failed the basic social etiquette course, having attempted to start a barbecue on the pristine lawn of the dean's private meditation garden. He aced advanced xenolinguistics, yet seemed incapable of understanding the simplest nonverbal cues for, "You are not welcome here." Kthar decided he'd had enough of observing. He heaved his massive frame from his seat, the floor groaning in protest. "I will ascertain its purpose. Do try not to break our new pet, Lord Captain," Xylos chimed, a thread of amusement in his psychic message. The dean was most particular about its preservation. The massive warrior stomped over to Jake's table, his shadow falling over the human like a collapsing building. The refectory fell silent. This was the moment many had been waiting for. The inevitable confrontation between a galactic apex and a cosmic afterthought. Jake looked up from his bowl. He had to crane his neck. Kthar was very, very tall. "Hey there," Jake said, his mouth full of cheese-covered pasta. "Can I help you?" Kthar crossed his upper set of arms, a gesture of dominance so potent it could make lesser beings physically ill. "Human," he began, his voice dropping to a register that could shatter stone. "You are occupying a designated high-traffic seating area. Your presence is a disruption to the flow of more significant beings." Jake blinked. He looked around at the mostly empty tables surrounding him. "Oh, sorry," he said, swallowing his food. "I didn't realize." "I can move." He started to gather his tray. This was not the reaction Kthar had anticipated. He had expected fear. He had expected pleading. He had, at the very least, expected some pathetic attempt at defiance. This cheerful compliance was unnerving. "Halt," Kthar commanded. "I have not dismissed you. I wish to comprehend your function. You are weak. Your species is fragile. You have no place among warriors and scholars. Why are you here?" Jake paused, his spork halfway to his mouth. He seemed to genuinely consider the question. "Well, the brochure was very nice," he said finally. "Good pictures of the campus. And they said the food was included." From across the room, Xylos broadcasted a wave of pure, unadulterated psychic laughter. It felt like tiny, cold needles in the minds of everyone present. Kthar's mandible twitched in irritation. The human was making a fool of him by simply existing. "You mock the unbroken fist." Kthar snarled, leaning down, his face inches from Jake's. The human didn't even flinch. He just smelled faintly of processed cheese. "Your species hides behind flimsy metal ships and speaks with a false tongue of peace. But when faced with true power, you tremble. You are nothing." Jake set his spork down. He looked Kthar directly in his multifaceted eyes. His expression was no longer cheerful. It was something else. Something calm and steady and ancient. It was the look of a mountain that had been rained on for 1,000,000 years and simply did not care anymore. "You know," Jake said, his voice quiet but carrying in the silent hall. "You're not the first person to tell me that. You guys have claws and 4 arms and psychic powers. We get it. We're soft. We're squishy. We don't have a big, scary name like the Unbroken Fist, but you know what we do have." He leaned forward, as if sharing a secret. "We have PDA meetings. We have Black Friday sales. We have to assemble IKEA furniture." He shook his head slowly. "You have no idea what true horror is." Before Kthar could process this baffling stream of nonsense, a siren blared through the proctorate. It wasn't the rhythmic, orderly pulse of a drill. It was a chaotic, shrieking wail that spoke of genuine, pants-wetting panic. Red lights bathed the refectory in a bloody glow. A synthesized, Frantic voice echoed from the walls. Containment breach. Containment breach. Xenobiology wing, level Gamma. Specimen 734 is loose. All personnel, initiate lockdown protocol Omega. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The name, Specimen 734, sent a jolt of collective terror through the room. Every student at the proctorate knew what that was. It was a legend, a horror story whispered in the dormitories. It was the Gloomfang of Nyx. The Gloomfang was not just a predator. It was a living weapon of psychological warfare. It didn't have claws or teeth in the conventional sense. It didn't need them. The Gloomfang was a semi-corporeal shadow entity that fed on fear. It didn't just kill you. It found the deepest, darkest terror in your mind, pulled it out, and made you live it until your own brain boiled in your skull. It was a Class 9 psychopredator, and it was loose in a school full of the galaxy's best and brightest. Panic erupted. Students screamed and scrambled, their superior intellects and warrior codes forgotten in a primal wave of self-preservation. Beings of immense power and dignity trampled each other to get to the sealed blast doors. Xylos felt a lance of cold terror pierce his usually serene mind. The Gloomfang was a creature of pure, unstructured ID. It was chaos incarnate. His own powers, based on logic and psychic geometry, would be useless against it. It was like trying to build a house in the middle of a hurricane. Thar, however, saw an opportunity. At last, he roared over the din, a worthy challenge. A test of true strength. He slammed his fists together, creating a shower of sparks. I will face this beast. I will break it upon the anvil of my will. Amidst the chaos, only one being in the entire refectory remained seated. Jake was calmly finishing his macaroni and cheese. He scraped the last bit from the bowl with his spork, popped it into his mouth, and then carefully wiped his mouth with a napkin. He looked at the screaming, fleeing academics and warriors with a look of mild curiosity. Well, he muttered to himself. This feels familiar. The blast doors slammed shut, sealing the refectory and its remaining occupants inside. The screaming faded, replaced by the ominous hum of the emergency power and the frantic, shallow breathing of those left behind. Thar stood proud and defiant in the center of the room. Xylos had retreated to a corner, his slender form wrapped in a shimmering field of psychic energy, his antennae twitching nervously. A handful of other students were huddled under tables, whimpering. And then there was Jake, who was now stacking his tray neatly. You. Thar pointed a claw at him. Human, stay behind me. Your cowardice is an insult, but your death would be a logistical inconvenience, shouldn't we, find a closet to hide in? Jake asked, gesturing vaguely. Or maybe barricade the door with some of these tables. Standard procedure for an active threat situation, hiding is for prey. Thar boomed. I am a hunter. I will meet this Gloomfang in glorious combat and feast on its dark heart. Right? Glorious combat, Jake said, nodding slowly. Just a quick question. Does this thing have any known weaknesses? Like, is it allergic to peanuts? Does it hate loud noises? Any intel at all? Xylos projected his thoughts, his mental voice sharp and frayed with anxiety. It is a psychic entity, you primitive. It has no physical body to be allergic to anything. It exists as a nexus of pure terror. It will find what you fear most and make it real. Jake rubbed his chin. So it's like a boggart? There was a moment of confused silence. What? Xylos' psychic voice dripped. Is a boggart? Never mind. Pop culture reference. Wouldn't make sense. Jake looked around the room, his eyes scanning the architecture, the emergency systems, the other occupants. Okay, so, big scary fear monster on the loose. Thar, you're planning to punch it. Xylos, you're meditating very hard in the corner. And everyone else is about to have a panic-induced aneurysm. Got it? A low, scraping sound echoed from the ventilation shafts. It was a sound that didn't belong, a noise that felt like it was coming from inside your own skull. The lights flickered and dimmed. The air grew cold. A thin, oily black mist began to seep from the vents, smelling of ozone and old graves. The whimpering from under the tables intensified. One of the students, a crystalline entity from Polaris B, began to vibrate at a frequency that threatened to shatter it. Its greatest fear, apparently, was poor acoustics. It comes, Thar roared, planting his feet and raising all four of his fists. Face me, shadow spawn. faced the might of the unbroken fist. The black mist coalesced in the center of the room. It swirled and thickened, pulling the light and warmth from its surroundings. It did not form a solid shape. Instead, it seemed to reach into the minds of those present. Kthar suddenly staggered back, his bravado evaporating like water on a hot skillet. His multifaceted eyes widened in horror. He was no longer in the refectory. He was on his homeworld, during his rite of passage. He was a young, terrified whelp, facing the legendary Graxworm. But this time, the worm was bigger. Its mandibles were dripping with the blood of his entire clan. He saw his father's broken crest on its chitin. He let out a bellow of pure, undiluted terror, a sound no Kthar warrior had made in 1,000 years. He dropped to his knees, his 4 mighty arms clamped over his head, a broken, sobbing wreck. Poor emotional regulation, Jake noted quietly. He's catastrophizing. The shadow then turned its attention to the corner. Xylos's psychic shield flared, then sputtered as the Gloomfang's influence seeped through. Xylos saw what he feared most, intellectual irrelevance. He saw endless libraries of data, all of it proving his life's work, his entire species' philosophy, to be fundamentally wrong. He saw himself as a simpleton, a fraud, a cosmic joke whose theories were taught to schoolchildren as an example of historical foolishness. The wind chime resonance of his mind became a frantic, discordant clanging. He collapsed, his mind trapped in a feedback loop of academic inadequacy. Oof. Imposter syndrome. That's a tough one, Jake commented, looking entirely unfazed. The Gloomfang had neutralized the 2 most powerful beings in the room in seconds. It had fed on their fear, and it was growing stronger. The black mist roiled and expanded, now flickering with images from the minds of the cowering students. Crushing debt, social awkwardness, final exams they hadn't studied for. It was a cosmic garage sale of anxiety. And then, it finally noticed the human. The creature, if it could be called that, focused its immense psychic power on the small, soft being standing calmly by the tray return station. It reached into his mind, ready to pull forth his deepest, most primal terror. It searched for the fear of death, of pain, of loneliness, of the dark. And it found nothing. It was like trying to punch water. It was like trying to shout in a vacuum. The human's mind was not a fortress of psychic shielding like Xylos's, nor was it a shallow pond of bravado like Kthar's. It was something else entirely. It was a calm, quiet, well-lit space. There were neat little filing cabinets. Everything was labeled. There was a faint smell of coffee and chalk dust. The Gloomfang recoiled, confused. This was impossible. Every sapient being had fear. Fear was the foundation of life, the engine of survival. To not have fear was to not be alive. It tried again, pushing harder. It dredged for subconscious terrors, for forgotten childhood traumas. It found a vague memory of a clown at a birthday party that was more confusing than scary, a mild anxiety about parallel parking, and a deeply repressed horror of running out of coffee filters on a Monday morning. Compared to the epic, soul-shattering terrors of a warrior king and a quantum-brain scholar, this was pathetic. The Gloomfang was an artist of fear, and it had been given a canvas with no texture. Jake watched the swirling black mist flicker and pulse. It seemed to be having some trouble. He took a step forward. The remaining students gasped. "Hey," Jake said, his voice calm and even. "You seem a little worked up. Are you okay?" The shadow writhed. It projected an image directly into Jake's mind, a vision of Earth, his homeworld, being consumed by a black hole. It was a standard, entry-level threat. Jake just sighed. "Yeah, see, that's the heat death of the universe. We know about that. It's billions of years away. I'm more worried about my cholesterol." To be honest, the Gloomfang was getting frustrated. It manifested a new form, something it pulled from a deeper, more primal part of the human psyche. It became a towering, skeletal figure in a black robe, holding a scythe. The classic Reaper. Jake nodded in appreciation. "Oh, that's a good one. Very traditional. Nice work on the scythe. Is that carbon fiber?" "Looks light." The creature was now officially baffled. It had never encountered anything like this. It threw everything it had at him. Visions of his own death, visions of failure, visions of being utterly alone. Jake met each one with the mild, patient disinterest of a man watching a timeshare presentation he had no intention of buying into. Finally, Jake took another step forward, into the heart of the cold, black mist. The cowering aliens watched in horror, convinced they were about to see the human's soul ripped from his body. Jake stopped right in front of the most concentrated part of the swirling darkness. He looked at it, his head tilted. He wasn't looking at a monster. He was looking at a child throwing a tantrum. A very large, very loud, and very reality-warping tantrum. "Okay, look," Jake said, using a voice that was startlingly gentle. It was a voice honed by years of practice, a perfect blend of warmth, firmness, and infinite patience. "I can see that you're having some very, very big feelings right now. And that's okay. It's okay to feel angry and scared. But we don't lash out and try to melt people's brains when we feel that way. That's not a healthy coping mechanism." The gloomfong stopped swirling. The horrifying images flickered and died. It just hovered. "You're in a new place. It's loud. It's bright. There are a lot of strange people. I get it. It's overwhelming." Jake continued, his voice a soothing balm. "But you can't just go around scaring everyone. That's not how we make friends." He slowly reached out his hand, palm open and non-threatening. "How about we just take a deep breath? Can we do that together? Let's try." In through the non-corporeal nasal passage, and out through the shadowy maw, the oily black mist, the Class 9 psychopredator, the nightmare of Nyx. Visibly deflated, it shrank, the darkness losing its sharp, terrifying edge and becoming soft, like smoke. It tentatively drifted forward and nudged Jake's outstretched hand, emitting a low, mournful hum that sounded suspiciously like a purr. Jake gently patted the cloud of existential dread. "There we go. That's better, isn't it? It's all going to be okay." He looked over his shoulder at the collection of stunned aliens. "Does anyone have a juice box? I find a good juice box can work wonders after a big emotional outburst." Silence. Utter, profound, galaxy-shattering silence. Then, from under a table, a small, furry creature with 6 eyes timidly slid a juice pouch across the floor. Jake picked it up. "Thanks, buddy." He turned back to the now docile cloud of shadow, which was nuzzling his leg like a lost puppy. "See? We just needed to use our words." The blast doors hissed open, and a squad of heavily armed Proctorate security guards stormed in, followed by the Academy's dean, a towering insectoid with a face that was permanently locked in an expression of severe disappointment. They stopped dead, their plasma rifles aimed and ready, taking in the bizarre scene. They saw Kthar, the mightiest warrior of his generation, curled in a fetal position, whispering about a mean worm. They saw Xylos, the brilliant psychic, babbling about his doctoral thesis being derivative. They saw a dozen other students in various states of catatonic shock. And in the middle of it all, they saw the human. Jake, the soft, squishy, primitive joke. He was calmly feeding a juice box to a purring cloud of concentrated metaphysical terror. The dean clicked his mandibles, a sound like 1,000 tiny skeletons tap dancing. "Human," he chirped, his voice strained. "Explain." Now, Jake looked up, holding the now empty juice pouch. The gloomfong let out a happy little sigh and dissolved into a small, shimmering orb of light that floated peacefully in the air next to him. "Oh, him," Jake said, gesturing to the orb. He was just overstimulated. A lot of new faces, probably missed his nap. "He's fine now. Aren't you, little guy?" The orb pulsed with a soft, contented glow. Kthar had slowly started to recover, his mind reasserting its dominance over the phantom fears. He staggered to his feet, his pride in tatters. He looked at the human, then at the harmless floating orb, and his warrior brain simply could not compute. "How?" Kthar rasped, his voice hoarse. "How did you face it? What is your power?" Xylos, also regaining his senses, glided forward, his antennae trembling. "Your mind. It is a blank slate. An intellectual void." The creature had nothing to grasp. "How is this possible? Does your species not experience fear?" Jake chuckled. It was a weary sound. "Oh, we do. Believe me, we do. We're terrified. All the time. Of everything. The stock market, weird-looking moles, whether we left the oven on. We're a species powered by anxiety. That's our secret." He sat down on a nearby bench, looking tired for the first time. The adrenaline was wearing off. "You guys don't get it," he began, and every being in the room leaned in, desperate to understand. "You're all apex predators of your own worlds. You evolved with big claws, or sharp teeth, or superbrains. You're at the top of your food chains. There was never anything that could seriously challenge you. We, on the other hand, he continued, evolved on a planet that was actively, creatively, and enthusiastically trying to murder us 24 hours a day. You think this place is dangerous? He laughed. This place is a sterile nursery compared to Earth. Our planet's gravity is so strong it's constantly trying to crush our skeletons. We call a nice day one where the weather doesn't try to kill us with lightning, tornadoes, or falling chunks of ice. We have tiny, invisible organisms that can shut down our entire bodies. We call it the flu. We have insects whose venom can dissolve flesh. We have snakes that can kill you with a single bite. We have giant bears that can outrun our land vehicles. We have sharks that are basically swimming torpedoes with teeth. And that's just the stuff we can see. The aliens stared, their various mouths and orifices agape. Xylos was surreptitiously recording every word. You think that Gloomfang thing is scary? Jake asked, his voice taking on a new tone. It feeds on fear. That's amateur hour. It's a one-trick pony. On Earth, we have creatures that don't need your fear. They don't care about your feelings. They just need to eat. Or they're defending their territory. Or they're just plain mean. Have you ever met a cassowary? It's a bird. A giant bird with a 6-inch claw on its foot that it uses to disembowel things for fun. We put them in zoos. He took a deep breath. But none of that. None of that is the real training. That's just the basic environment. The real training, he said, his eyes distant. Is other humans. He paused, letting that sink in. And then, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. We create the most dangerous, most unpredictable, most psychologically devastating creature in the known universe. And we willingly bring them into our homes, a weapon. Thar guessed, his warrior instincts kicking in. A biological agent. Worse, Jake said grimly. A toddler, a collective, confused murmur went through the room. A toddler is a juvenile human, between the ages of 2 and 4, Jake explained, as if lecturing a class. It is a being of pure, unadulterated chaos. It has no sense of self-preservation. It is immune to logic. Its primary motivation is to acquire snacks and touch things it shouldn't. It communicates through a combination of rudimentary language and a scream that can shatter glass and parental wills. He stood up and began to pace. A Gloomfang projects your greatest fear? A toddler becomes your greatest fear. It will find the one fragile, expensive thing you own and destroy it. It will wait until you are on an important video call to have a complete and total emotional meltdown for no reason. It can turn a silent, peaceful house into a war zone in under 30 seconds. It is a tiny, sticky-fingered agent of entropy. That Gloomfang was scared and confused in a new environment, Jake said, pointing at the floating orb. That's just a Tuesday for a toddler. That thing wanted to scare me? I've had a 3-foot-tall human look me dead in the eye while calmly pouring a gallon of milk onto a brand new laptop. You think a vision of a black hole scares me after that? The void has nothing on the look in a toddler's eyes when you tell them it's time to put their shoes on. He stopped pacing and turned to the stunned crowd. My job, my official title on Earth, is kindergarten teacher. I am responsible for the care and education of 25 of these beings. At the same time, for 8 hours a day, Thar took an involuntary step back. Xylos' psychic presence felt like it had just touched a live power conduit. 25. At the same time. The Gloomfang was easy, Jake said with a shrug. It was just one of him. He was communicating his needs, just in a very loud way. All I had to do was validate his feelings, establish a boundary, and redirect his energy. It's de-escalation 101. I do that a dozen times before my morning coffee. Honestly, the hardest part of this whole thing was the spork, the dean of the proctorate, a being who had negotiated peace treaties between warring star empires, looked at the human with a newfound expression. It was a look of pure, unadulterated terror. He was looking at a man who willingly entered a room with 25 chaos demons every day. A man who considered a class 9 psychopredator easy. He finally understood. Humans weren't weak because they were soft and squishy. They were strong because they had to be. Their weakness was the very source of their strength. They had no natural armor, so they built starships. They had no natural weapons, so they mastered physics. They had no psychic powers, so they developed something far more terrifying: patience. Humanity wasn't a joke. It was a horror story, and they hadn't even gotten to the scary part yet. Thar walked over to Jake, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by a deep and profound respect. He placed a heavy, clawed hand on the human's shoulder. "Teach me," the warrior grunted. "Teach me of this." IKEA furniture, Jake just smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. And for the first time, nobody in the room thought it was a threat. They knew it was something much, much worse. It was a promise.